So this is no way of handling such an agitation. ये इनकलाब है सर, ये रेवोल्यूशन है.
Thousands of Indian farmers have encircled the capital, New Delhi, protesting against the new farm bills that they say threatens their livelihoods.
Thousands of farmers continue to block roads into the capital, Delhi.
Indian farmers blocking roads in a protest against new laws.
In September, a set of 3 laws were enacted by the Modi government as reform measures to help rid India's vast agriculture sector of archaic laws. Authorities say that the new laws will allow farmers to sell produce and boost production through private investment. But farmers usually sell their produce at government-regulated wholesale markets, locally known as mandis, where they are assured a minimum procurement price. Protesters fear the new laws will leave them at the mercy of private buyers and vulnerable to exploitation that could dictate the market price and possibly erase minimum limits.
कमेरे वर्ग को लूटकर उन पूंजीपतियों की तिजोरी भर रहे हैं. पूरे हिंदुस्तान की जो तमाम सरकारी महकमे हैं उनका निजीकरण किया जा रहा है.
जो 3 खेती मंडी तोड़ने वाले ऑर्डिनेंस लेके आए हैं, जिससे खेती मंडी प्रभावित होगी, पूरा किसान मजदूर प्रभावित होगा, देश का हर वर्ग प्रभावित होगा और हमारी होंद को खतरा है. कारपोरेट जगत का हमारी जमीनों पे कब्जा होगा.
Under old rules, hoarding of produce was a criminal offence. The new rules could give traders the chance to stock up food items, making it easier for them to take advantage of rising prices. But Indian Prime Minister Modi has hailed the new laws as a watershed moment which will ensure a complete transformation of the agriculture sector and empower millions of farmers. He says the farmers are being misled.
ऐतिहासिक कृषि सुधारों के मामले में भी जानबूझकर यही खेल खेला जा रहा है. हमें याद रखना है, ये वही लोग हैं जिन्होंने दशकों तक किसानों के साथ लगातार छल किया है.
Farmers have long been seen as the heart and soul of India. Agriculture supports more than half of the country's 1.4 billion people. But for the last 30 years, they've seen an economic downfall. Once accounting for 1/3 of India's gross domestic product, they now produce only 15% of India's GDP, which is currently valued at $2.9 trillion. Farmers have been protesting against the laws for nearly 2 months in Punjab and Haryana states, where they have also been blocking key highways. But the protests gained nationwide limelight in November when thousands of farmers clashed with police who used tear gas, water cannons and batons against them as they tried to enter the capital before finally letting them in. Meanwhile, a meeting between Indian ministers and farmers has failed to break a deadlock over the new laws. An offer to set up expert committees to discuss the new laws has been rejected by the farmers.
मीटिंग में कुछ नहीं निकलिया. सरकार दा राजा भी चर्चा करते रहो, मसला हल नहीं करना. इस करके ਅਸੀਂ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਫ਼ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਚਰਚਾ ਨਾਲ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਨਾ. ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਬਣੇ ਜਾਂ ਮਸਲਾ ਹੱਲ ਕਰੇ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਦੀ ਤਾਕਤ ਦੀ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਕਰ ਲੇ.
They have vowed to continue protesting and say they won't leave until the government rolls back what they call black walls.
अगर नहीं बोलेगी तो इसके तौण पे गोडा रखकर ਅਸੀਂ मनवा कर जाएंगे, ऐसे नहीं जाएंगे.
Farmers on Wednesday rejected the government's proposal to amend 3 controversial laws and said they would step up protests seeking withdrawal of these laws, which they said would harm their economic interests while helping big food retailers. Farmers have been demonstrating since late last month for over reforms enacted in September that unravelled the rules around the sale, pricing and storage of farm produce that had protected farmers from an unfettered free market for decades. Many Indian farmers believe the overhaul will lead to lower prices, dismantle regulated markets, increase corruption on the wholesale market and pave the way for corporate hostile takeovers of their small farms, which average less than 3 acres in size. Farmer protests have spread and intensified pressure on Prime Minister Modi's government to strike a fair deal. A 41-year-old farmer in the parched regions of Punjab, he knew that setting piles of field waste on fire after harvest contributes to the pollution that often chokes New Delhi and the rest of northern India. but he is one of thousands of farmers in an increasingly nationwide pushback against Prime Minister Narendra Modi's proposal to overhaul the way many of the country's 146 million farms do business. Mr. Modi has said that his market-oriented reform would free them from the constraints of a state-run system. Farmer protests in India are a historic show of solidarity against Prime Minister Modi's staging of neoliberalism, Hindu nationalism and fascist idealism, and the Sikh faith is at the heart of it. Sikh farmers in India on Monday demonstrated religious solidarity at the farmers' protest by standing up with their Muslim counterparts. Meanwhile, Sikh farmers, who were in majority, could be seen standing at the site, encircling the Muslim farmers so that they could offer their prayers in peace. In a show of solidarity, Sikh farmers stopped all their activities and stood there in silence as not to disturb the Muslim worshippers or Namazis. Since the formation of the modern state in 1947, Sikhs have been targeted as a minority faith community in India. 1984 saw the state-sanctioned raid on Harmandir Sahib, the spiritual and temporal home of the Sikhs. Since then, thousands of Sikhs have gone missing in fake encounters with the Punjab and Indian state, with Scottish Sikh activist Jagtar Singh Johal currently having been detained for over 3 years. The Indian state's treatment of Sikhs has provoked and justified demands for Sikh autonomy and sovereignty, largely communicated through the call for Khalistan, the land of the Khalsa. The Sikh order formed in 1699, BJP and government supporting Gaudiya media in India have used these historical struggles to label protesters in India and the diaspora as terrorists. In failed attempts to break down the solidarity between workers and those of differing castes and religions, unified in the rallying cry Kisan Mazdoor Ekta Zindabad, meaning long live farmer worker unity. The complex material conditions agricultural workers experience and their reasons for protesting mustn't be homogenized, from women agricultural workers not being formally classified as farmers, which excludes many from government initiatives, to disparities between land-owning farmers and marginalized landless workers who are often from lower castes and indigenous Adivasi communities. Intersectional dynamics of gender, caste, religion and other hierarchies must be taken into account. The resistance to the farming bills should be understood both in India and diasporas in their wider socio-political context of the BJP's agenda of marginalizing minorities deemed an existential threat to a mythologized notion of India as a purely Hindu nation, neoliberalism and broader historical socio-political relations between minorities and the nation state. Protesters suspect the farm laws are rigged to benefit corporate backers of BJP Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 2014 winning election campaign, Ambani and Adani, whose wealth has doubled since Modi's victory. Modi's regime, which has seen anti-Muslim citizenship laws passed and lynchings against minorities increase, is heavily entangled with corporate interests. Protesters are showing no signs of backing down. Diaspora protests continue to take place most weekends, and UK Sikh student societies are raising funds for charities Kheti Virasat Mission and Sahita, who are supporting the protests, agricultural livelihoods and sustainable agricultural practices in Punjab. In the wake of Gaudiya media, it is important to amplify protest resistances by spreading solidarity and awareness online and countering Boris Johnson's ignorance in confusing the protests with Pakistan and India land disputes by writing to your MP asking them to condemn the violence protesters are facing in India. Boris Johnson has been labelled absolutely clueless after a parliamentary gaffe where he appeared to confuse massive farmers' protests that have closed down swaths of India with the ongoing conflict between India and Pakistan.